Jacqueline Matthews, it's wonderful to have you here on my podcast. And I'd love you to share more about what you do and why you do what you do. Why is it important to you?
The salient fact in my life is that I was born very short-sighted. Part of my game as a child, I would lie on the floor with a big blanket tucked all around me, and I would lie on the floor for up to 3 or 4 hours at a time. And my mother would be driven insensible, as I was an infant. What are you doing in there? Can you still
Oh,
breathe, dear? And things like this. And of course, what I was doing is that I was in the dark with my spirits, who I called the Shapers. They were basically the ones that came to me in my sort of solitude and showed me things in shapes and sounds and resonance. And I was lying in bed, sort of being really ill, and the Shapers came to me and said, "Do you want to carry on doing this, or do you want to do something else?" And it was like, well, what else would I do? I mean, I couldn't conceive of doing anything else. And they said, just tell us, what do you want to do? Do you want to carry on doing this, slowly dying, or do you want to do what we'll show you? So I said, well, I'll do what you show me. And I began to get better from that point. And then one day they said to me, okay, so we're going to do some teaching today. So I said, well, what do you want me to do? And they said, well, stand in the middle of the floor. So I did. And they said, dance.
yeah.
Okay, no problem. So I began to dance, and the clock was saying something like 2:05. And I danced, and the next thing I remember is the clock said something like 5:15, and I was on the floor in a pool of water. And I lived in a block of flats, so I just automatically went to the rational mind of, oh my God, my neighbours had a bath and the water's come through the ceiling. But actually, it was my own water I was lying in. I just completely sweated out like a horse. And because of my illness, I'd already started to write because I couldn't do very much work.
Right. Yeah.
Um, I've always been interested in history, and particularly in the history of these islands. We do have a tradition it is our own spiritual native tradition. So I began to do the research.
And so there's been very little knowledge, hasn't there, of our ancient
Yeah.
history here, our lineage.
I mean, there's been very little understanding of, the history of the Welsh, Irish, and Scots generally within
Right.
England, has there? I mean, you
Yeah.
get the official line, which is kings and queens, politics, corn laws, and there we are. Here we are.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
so
So
yeah,
at this stage, you've got your sort of shamanic world and your spirit guides, and that's a lot of healing has clearly come for you through that. You've
yeah.
experienced
I mean,
that
really,
directly.
I mean, I had no idea how this would be. The two main things that I see are things of ancestral causation and of vocational difficulty. Those are the two things I'll always get,
Okay.
always, because people know, it takes one to know one, as they say. Uh,
Right.
Whereas
Right.
a friend of mine, who's also practicing, been in danger of death many times and has had many serious operations. And so, of course, people come to her when they're in danger of death and have had lots of serious operations. So
Okay.
it makes sense,
Yes.
that people understand that yes, they can get general help, but there's a particular expertise that they will draw upon, which is
Yeah.
innate. Yeah,
And doesn't that often come from our own experiences in life,
it
somehow?
does, because these are our teachers, and
Yes.
and the awfultude of life, which it can sometimes be,
Yeah.
and the places where we dig ourselves into holes are not only our holes; they're also those of our ancestors.
Wow. And so, as a writer, what is your main focus on writing? What are you writing about?
The shamanic work that I do, almost none of it is written down. Is where does shamanism fit in society? And it's like there are societies where it fits really well, it just sits really
Yes.
comfortably along with everything else. But in our society, shamans sit in the same box as undertakers, prostitutes, rubbish collectors, tattoo artists, and those, because they're not people. We're not people that folk come to unless they really need us.
Okay.
And I think the reason that we're not in the marketplace is a very simple one, is that when people are driven to the edges of life, that's where we inhabit. They find us before they go over the edge. Yes.
Yes, I
And
understand.
I think that that is our situation in society. And with all my students, I make that very clear. It's like, do not imagine you're going to be the celebrity shaman. We can't be in the center. We're always going to be in that slightly, people don't invite shamans to parties. We're
Yeah.
at the edges, and I think we're at the edge for a good reason.
That makes total sense, Kathleen. It really does. Yeah, I can relate to it as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to our Celtic heritage, when it comes to living in the UK, in Britain, in England, what are our shamanic roots here?
We have the singing tradition, we have that musical tradition, which is one that I use all the time. And I'm singing all my journeys. I sing spontaneously for all my clients. And I sort of said, if you want to listen to this again, you're going to have to record it, because these songs will not come again.
Right.
They're only coming now for you now. The blessing that's in us, that vocational thing that we're bent to do, the thing that draws our heart, um, whatever that is, when that's in good sync with sort of larger spiritual contexts, everyone feels it.
Yes. I mean, this podcast, it's all about our soul purpose
Yeah.
and bringing our. I mean, I connect that very much to soul retrieval, to our sacred
Mm.
contract, why we're here, what's brought us here, who we are as children, and that being a kind of foundation
Indeed.
for our bringing ourselves into the world and reclaiming that, so retrieving that soul part. And so what do you see as your soul purpose here? Is there a particular name you give it, or body of work you give it? um, Anything in particular that is important to you around soul purpose?
And my whole life is my sole purpose. I mean that. I'm very fortunate to have, come through to a point where I can work in the areas that I want to work and which I know I was put on earth to do. My voice is for those who come in pain and in sorrow and who need healing. Yeah, my job is to sing their soul's landscape so that they can recognize it again.
So in talking about today's society, we're going through big changes. Hey, there's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot of distress,
Yeah,
a lot of sickness, of mind, body, spirit.
yeah.
What would you say to people today to help them through some of the challenges we're going through?
Ancestral ritual all the way up the wazoo, I'm afraid. Really, I mean, I think when we welcome the ancestors into our lives, as both our what I call the neighborly dead, as well as the greater dead, um, then I think we feel less abandoned because we are connected again to that. And when we leave them out, we become even more distressed and even more reactive and even more violent.
Mm,
And we are then playing out the things of the stuck dead, those that are stuck in time, who have either perpetrated violence or are the victims of violence, and other awful things. And that's not a good way to be. I just think, that wherever we are, in whatever circumstances we are, your spirits are near you, and all you have to do is turn to them, and ask for the help that you need. Yeah. It
beautiful.
can develop into a whole other thing later on, but we always start at that point of need. And
Yeah.
I love it when students get to that point when they say, well, I've been journeying on this and that and all these things that I have difficulties with, but I don't know what to do now. And I thought, great, now we can put you to work.
Yes, I get that one. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah.
And,
And
and that's the turnaround. It's we come in need and we learn from our need, and then we begin to be of service.
it's been an absolute pleasure to listen to you and to hear your story. Fascinating journey you've had. So thank you very, very much, and wish you well and all your projects much, yeah, much fulfillment.